Hello and welcome to our preview of Florida's matchup with Colorado in the NCAA tournament. I'm your host, Chris Lee, joined by Max Barr and Blake Lovell. A reminder, this is presented to you by BetOnline. The tournament's here. BetOnline is your bracket headquarters for this season with the best bracket contest out there. Odds, lines, info on every game right up until the national championship. You can access the most up-to-the-minute wagering information anytime from your desktop or mobile devices. Even track your bracket real-time all the way through the tournament. Head to BetOnline today. Get in on all the action. Remember to use promo code BELIEVE for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, the game starts here. Gentlemen, we last saw Florida in Nashville. We were all there in person. Of course, Florida's tournament run in the Southeastern Conference tournament ended unceremoniously. Micah Henlogton with that leg injury. Now meeting a Colorado team that is kind of a computer darling and three really outstanding players. KJ Simpson, who had about as good a year statistically as any guard in the country, almost never came off the floor. Tristan Da Silva, I think is another like preseason All-American type player, had a nice year. Cody Williams, a kid, if I remember this correctly, he's been mentioned as a lottery pick type.
Yep.
Now, the problem with Colorado, guys, is we're going to talk about Florida's depth in just a minute with the Henlogton injury because that does hurt things. But Colorado really is only going to play about six guys that contribute much. I'm presuming Julian Hamilton is going to be out of this game. He is a rotation guy for them. He's not played in a few weeks. Had, I want to say, a knee injury, and it kept sounding like it was, hit and miss that he could play at any time, but he's now not played in a month. I can't find an update there. With Florida, of course, the Henlogton injury happened. Florida's got Zion Pullen, Walter Clayton, Will Richard, who all played over 1,000 minutes. Tyrese Samuel was close. Alex Condon played a lot. He's going to play more. Riley Cougar, you never know. Thomas Hall, another guy, and then Denzel Aberdeen. So first off the top, I know depth is going to be a topic for Florida, but I think Colorado's even in worse shape because it was just kind of thin to begin with. I'm just going to use that as a jumping off point for a matchup that I think is a terrific one. And, oh, by the way, 3:30 Friday afternoon.
Yeah, this is going to be one of the harder games to pick of the first round. A play-in usually wins. A play-in almost always gets to the Sweet 16. Last year, I think they didn't get to the Sweet 16, just the round 32. And we saw Colorado State lose. So definitely nervous for this one. And on the matchups, man, this is a really tight matchup. Colorado's offense in the Pac-12, they're the number one three-point shooting team in the Pac-12 percentage-wise. They don't take a lot. Kind of think of Ole Miss type. They're 12th in three-point rate in the Pac-12, but first in percentage. So think of that Ole Miss style where they're not going to shoot a ton, but when they do get an open look, they got a lot of guys that shoot around 40%. But flip that, Florida defensively, the number one three-point percentage defense in the SEC. So you got strength on strength there. Colorado's perimeter play against Florida's perimeter defense. And then flip that, Florida's offense to Colorado's defense. We know, we've been saying it all year. What's one of the most imposing things Florida has to offer? It's their offensive rebounding. Now, I know that takes a little bit of a hit with Henlogton out, but still, Condon is very game. And Tommy, how do you do, should I say? I love him. So here's the thing, though. Florida, third best offensive rebounding team in the SEC. Colorado defensively, the number one defensive rebounding team. So you got strength on strength. Those are the two things that are jumping out on me, is where the teams rank the best in their conferences, the defense matches it for the other team. I'm finding very little where teams are going to be able to really pull away. I think the biggest difference might be Colorado at the free throw line. They get to the free throw line at the second highest rate in the Pac-12 and foul at the lowest rate. in Florida, we know they attack. Walter Clayton has plenty of games in double-digit free throws. So I think all things considered, this thing might come down to the free throw line with how tight these teams can negate each other.
Well, it's going to surprise you guys, but I'm going back to my friend Bart Torvik here, looking up some numbers based on this. The number 13 team in the country has been since February the 17th.
Colorado.
The Gators.
Colorado.
Darn it.
They were
They haven't
right
lost.
there.
They've lost once since the 15th of February.
Yeah, they lost to Oregon in the championship, or whatever. Yeah. So that's it. I mean, that they are playing as well as anybody. Like, they're surrounded with Purdue, North Carolina, Marquette. What do all those teams have in common, right? So, top 2 seeds.
Yeah.
So Colorado's played really, really well over the past month, and I think that is something that should concern you if you're Florida, because the Gators have also been playing pretty well. They're in the top 35 in that category. They're 33rd actually. So, again, and that's where we talk about just the strength of the guard play for Florida. That's really what it comes down to. I mean, if you're asking me why I've leaned on Florida, why I would lean on Florida moving further and further and further in this tournament, it's going to be how good their guards are. And so, like you mentioned, you lose some depth with Van Logden out. But, I look at just kind of the matchup, though, and the way this game is going to be played. I think there's still a really solid path for Florida here. Even with, like you mentioned, these aren't two teams that maybe don't have the depth. Either they thought they would at this point, whether due to an injury or just guys not, stepping up in certain roles or whatever. But nonetheless, this is a really good matchup on paper. And I think it's one where the thing that worries me a little bit for Florida, and I've told you guys this over the past little while, there are just situations where you kind of see this team, they play really well on the offensive end, but they just let teams hang around for way too long on the defensive end. And that worries me a little bit heading into this matchup.
Yeah, let's get into picks here and our whys. The NCAA tournament is about matchups. Look, the SEC, as we sit here doing this, is 1-3. And to be honest, has not had good matchups. Max, I'm glad you brought the rebounding thing up, because I was a little bit on the fence about what to do with this one. That's problematic. And I'm going to give you a number here. And then Florida's a really good rebounding team, and I keep per 70 possession stats. If you want to round up just a hair, they got 3 guys who grab over 10 rebounds a game. Well, actually, 4 of them are per 70 possessions. One of them is Thomas Hall. One of them is Alex Condon. One's Tyree Samuel. But the number 1 guy in rebounding rate is Micah Henlogton, who, of course, is not going to play. So that's concerning, is that Florida's down a little bit there, and Colorado's really good at keeping Florida from doing what it probably is its best attribute as a team offensively. Number 2, I just think this is a scoring match. You got 2 teams that are really good offensively. You got really good guards. Who can defend better? Colorado is ranked 34th in adjusted defensive efficiency. Florida's ranked 86th. Now, again, Florida's going to be deeper, but that's kind of already baked into what Colorado is. Colorado's been going 6 guys for a while, and has been playing, as Blake pointed out, really, really well. KJ Simpson, Williams, De Silva, all really good players. Eddie Lampkin is a nice player. They've got other guys who can do some stuff too. I look at it matchup-wise. I just don't like it for Florida. I'm going to take Colorado. And everybody knows I've been high on Florida all year, but you look at the matchups, and you have to be real. And honestly, I probably should have taken that more into account yesterday with Oregon and South Carolina. I didn't, having been burned on that once. I'm not going to get burned again. I'll take the Buffaloes.
Yeah, I don't blame you. One area, because I know, everyone is going to point to Henlogton being out. The one thing that's kind of nice for Florida is when we were watching that Florida-Auburn game and Condon was in, and, Condon gives him great minutes, but against Auburn, with the physicality of Broome and Jalen Williams and whatnot, down low, Condon, he had the length straight up and down, but would just get pushed too far under the basket and just wasn't able to hold his ground. Now, with Samuel matched up against Eddie Lampkin, that puts Condon against De Silva. Now, De Silva is much more of a finesse type of guy, has a great shot, plays around the perimeter a lot, but and does he has a good post game, but it's not like Broom where he can just, start you from 10 feet out and back you down underneath the basket. So I do like that matchup for Condon, how it's kind of he's not gonna get bullied physically by De Silva. And the main thing that I'm looking at, it's KJ Simpson versus Zion Pullen, basically. It's all Pac-12 guard against all SEC guard, and who makes their shots, because they're gonna equal each other out everywhere. Everything about the matchup is pointing me to pick Colorado with their defensive rebounding and whatnot. But I really think that there might be an overreaction to Henlockton being out. Florida's a rare team that has another 6'11" guy that's played starter minutes. I like the boys rallying around Micah. Give me Florida here in a close one.
Well, it's a tough game to pick because I think these two teams are right there with each other in terms of that. We talked about how well Colorado's been playing. We talked about the concerns with Florida defensively and all that. Overall, the SEC has had a really good tournament history against the Pac-12, and we kind of pointed out the number yesterday. I think it was like 12-5 or something. And of course, Oregon beat South Carolina, but as we said, we thought that was matchup based too, where that wasn't really a surprise, even as a 6-11 setup. It's like we've seen one SEC team that specialty is offense and non-specialty is defense. We've seen that team already go down. Yeah. There's another one that maybe by the time this game is played, maybe there's another team that joins that list. The trio of offensive juggernauts with Florida, Kentucky, and Alabama. Maybe two of them are out by that point. But I'm going to keep sticking with what I've said. You can look at the numbers, you can look at the computers and all this, but I think Florida, the value of Florida is in their guard play. And I just feel like I trust Walter Clayton Jr. to hit big shots. I trust Zion Pullen to make big plays. And I think they're good enough, even with good players, to combat what they do on the other side. Yes, Colorado has been great over the past month, but I also know in that stretch they've beaten Oregon and they kind of beat Washington State. The rest of the Pac-12, Cal, Stanford, Oregon State, USC, teams like that, they are what they are, right? And I think I see what Florida has done, and sure, like we mentioned, they've lost a couple games they shouldn't, but they have beaten an Auburn. They've beaten an Alabama. They've beaten Alabama again. They beat A&M. And I think there's something, too, to what Max said about that they will use the Henlockton injury here, I think, as part of kind of the motivation to make a run. And so give me a Florida team that maybe has a little bit of a chip on its shoulder coming in, played really well last week. And remember, too, every game since basically mid-January, if you take out the Auburn game in the championship, where we kind of thought, and remember, too, you have to factor in the Henlockton thing into that game. But if you take that out, 1-point loss against A&M, 5-point loss in overtime to Alabama, 6-point loss at South Carolina, of course, the 1-point loss to Vanderbilt, which is kind of the one that made you kind of shake your head a little bit. But they kind of took that one out by making the run they made in the SEC tournament. So I think it's a really close game. I'd be surprised if it's like a 5-point game one way or the other. More than that, I just feel like it goes down to the wire. But I'm gonna stick with the Gator guards. Like, that's what I'm gonna stick with, because I feel like I've been talking about them all year, and I'm gonna say that's the reason they have a chance to win this game. So,
all right, can't wait to watch it. This should be one of the better matchups of Friday. We'll be here to recap it on Saturday morning, although I'll be very limited in my involvement in that. But in any case, these guys will have us carried. I know they'll do a great job. For Max Barr, Blake Lovell, I'm Chris Lee. We are Southeastern 14, presented by BetOnline.